let's just wait for a while for others to join in. Yeah, the numbers are increasing, people are joining in. Meanwhile, if you have any queries, I think we can take them. We can take your queries meanwhile. Yeah, and I hope you've also had a look at the assignment that I've shared with you. The practical thing that I wanted to share, I haven't done that. I would rather discuss that in the class because I thought you may not have the time, given that you all are working, to take that complex assignment, and then given the nature of the course, this is the ODL thing. So I'll rather cover that in some way in my class, but I try to give you an assignment which is more comprehensively covering half of the curriculum, and based on what I have discussed in the class, and based on SLM and the internet resources, I would like you to complete that. And if you've seen it, it provides you certain spaces and area to work, and this assignment will not only help you brush up the entire concepts, in a very minimal sort of coverage, and also at the same time it will help you prepare for your examinations, right? So this assignment will be very instrumental in clearing up your concepts. So I hope you start working on them. Do it nicely. I said that it's a printed assignment, since many of you may not have touch screens to work on. So I mean, to write on the PDF itself. So you can take a printout, you can solve right answers to these questions, do the drawings and illustrations, complete the diagrams, and do the entire assignment, then scan it, upload it on the drive link that I have shared on the assignment itself. There's also a QR code that you can refer, and alongside a copy on Moodle for record of the ODL team. So I would expect you to do that. Do it nicely and diligently. If there's anything you don't understand, you can feel free to ask me, whether on WhatsApp or during the sessions. I'll try to cover most of
Excuse
it.
me, sir.
Yeah. Go
Sir,
ahead.
there is a question in the assignment in which there is a circular flow in the economy and a diagram is given, the chart. So I wanted to ask you that there are some those fill in the blanks are given, like the role and objective. Other than that, there are like the arrows pointing
Yes.
towards the government,
Right.
firms and households. So I
Right.
wanted to ask you that we have to label the whole diagram, or we just have to fill in those blanks only?
You have to fill in the blanks, but if you can label the arrows by showing what is it showing. So
Okay.
you have studied something called the real and the monetary circular flow, if you remember, right? So
Yes, sir.
so let's say if the real flow goes like this, right? It's a circular economy, right? So if the
Yes, sir.
factor services are going from households to the firms, then obviously factor payments are going from firm to household. This is called what? This part is the part of real flow. This is the monetary. Similarly, when I
Yes.
talk about the goods and services going from firms to the household, this is the real part, and the payment for goods and services, right? The payment for goods and services is going from household to firms. So you see, this is a two-directional monetary circular flow, and this is a bi-directional real circular flow. So you can label that. It gives you a very clear idea. अगर इतना label कर लोगे तो लिख भी पाओगे exam में. Similarly, what are the roles and the goals of the entities? So in a very small space, you'll be able to do everything and recollect all the topics, things that I've discussed in the class.
Okay, sir. Thank
Right.
you.
You're welcome. Okay. So now taking ahead from where I left, so now most of the fundamental things have been discussed, which were needed to be discussed before coming on to the first topic, which we'll take as part of demand analysis, and we'll start with understanding utility and utility analysis, right? So that's what I'll cover, and then extension to this definitely would be your law of demand, which we'll study. We'll also talk about indifference curves and so on, covering the ordinal and the cardinal utility approaches and so on and so forth. So we'll cover all that, and though supply was, as I said, was not a part here, supply would from a firm's perspective be related to how much to supply in the market later on, depending on the market structure as well. But we will take supply here only immediately after demand, because both the topics are quite similar in their fundamental understanding. Okay, so that's what we'll cover in this particular few sessions, the first and the second session that I'll take from now. So let's start with utility, and this is very important. You have already come across this term in the circular flow, that when we talk about the consumers and the customers, we are looking at this term that they are trying to maximize their utility. The consumers, the customers want to maximize their utility, and utility leads to obviously satisfaction. So utility is what? Utility is the satisfying capacity or capability of a product or a good or a service, right? Good or service. So how much a product X can satisfy your need or want is what we are talking about in terms of utility. Now I give you an example. If you remember the other day, that a glass of cold drink, let's say, you pour a cold take out a bottle from the refrigerator and put a cold drink in the glass, and you consume it. Now next time when you immediately, without much delay or gap, you try to consume glass number 2, you realize that it does not satisfy you to the extent the first glass had satisfied you. I'm talking about individually. The additional satisfaction is not as much as it was in the case of first. It has reduced. However, as we have already discussed, the total satisfaction might have gone up. What do I mean? If I am able to rate my satisfaction or my utility, I say that we can't measure it as such. We are taking a cardinal approach, but we are assuming that, let's say, the first glass gave me 10 utils of satisfaction. We are using a term called utils, 10 utils of satisfaction. And let's say after having the second glass gave me somewhere around less, maybe 5 utils of satisfaction. But I could still drink it because it was giving me some additional satisfaction. So the total satisfaction is 15, but the marginal satisfaction or the marginal utility had reduced. So first case, the marginal utility was 10 and total was 10 again. In the second case, the marginal was 5 and the total became 15. So total, instead of 10 to 20, it just moved on from 10 to 15. It increased at a decreasing rate. That's what we discussed, because the marginal had declined. This is what we'll study under the law of diminishing marginal utility. But the point I'm trying to tell about utility is that if it was the same quality of cold drink at the same temperature, same level of fizz, and from the same bottle without much delay, right? In such case, the product is purely homogeneous. Both the products were homogeneous. So if the first glass had the ability to satisfy your thirst and to satisfy you with the taste, what happened with the second unit that your taste wasn't the same? This tells us some very interesting aspect about utility, that utility definitely is there in the product. There is no doubt. Cold drink had some utility to satisfy. If you are a fitness freak, you don't like soda pop, you don't like soda, then you wouldn't have tried a cold drink. Or if you don't like cold drink and you enjoy fresh juices, you wouldn't have had it. So either the product had utility or it did not have utility for you. But if the product had utility for you, it was based on your liking and preference, the utility still changed with the same product. Why? So it gives us an idea that the overall utility of the product or the satisfaction that you derive from it depends on two important aspects. One aspect lies within the product itself. And what is that? The value in use. The product has certain value in use. वो product की intrinsic value है, product के अंदर वो quality है. So you can, as a firm, try to create this, but still there is something which is beyond the capacity of the firm. And what is that? The intensity of desire. वो जो need customer की थी, वो जो intensity थी, वो nature था, कहीं ना कहीं वो भी यूटिलिटी को इफेक्ट कर रही थी. इसीलिए पहले ग्लास के केस में जो यूटिलिटी आई वो सेकेंड ग्लास के केस में नहीं आ पाई, बिकॉज द थर्स्ट ऑफ द इंडिविजुअल हैड गॉन डाउन, हिज सेंसेस वर पार्टली सेटिस्फाइड, his capacity was to some extent achieved, and that's why the additional capacity to take soft drink was not at par with the first case. इतना समझ आ रहा है? So this is what we call value in use, right? And this is the intensity of desire, and utility is affected by the value in the product and the desire or the nature of the need, the intensity of need or want of the consumer. जब ये दोनों, it's a utility is a marriage between the two. When they two combine, they ultimately decide how much satisfaction you would get. If any of them turn out to be negative, it is going to have an impact on your satisfaction. And if both of them turn out to be positive, obviously the satisfaction is going to increase. I hope this much is clear. So utility is the want satisfying capacity of a product. The first thing is the want satisfying capacity of a product, number one. Second, utility is subjective. Second point, it is subjective. Subjective means it changes from person to person. It changes from person to person. If somebody likes cold drinks, he would go for a glass of cold drink and get satisfied. But the same glass of cold drink will not satisfy somebody who does not like the taste or does not find it to be healthy. So there are people who like the product, the people who do not like the product, their needs, wants are very different, their desires are very different. So it is subjective. The third thing about utility as a characteristic is that it is relative. This is more complex, and this makes utility a very interesting subject and makes economics and its decisions more complex and dynamics. That utility is relative. Relative means it changes from situation to situation. That means for the same person, for this person who liked the cold drink, the next time when he consumed the same glass at a regular interval without much gap, the satisfaction had diminished, it has reduced, right? So for the same person, utility can vary from time to time and situation to situation. And on the other hand, for somebody who did not have utility in the product, let's say he was extremely thirsty on a particular day and he could not find water, or he could not find a healthy juice and no other option, but he could only find a glass of cold drink or coke, probably might have it on that particular day to satisfy himself. This is very subjective. The same day this product satisfies him when it could not satisfy him the other day. So because the other day I told you, our needs, wants and desires, when we talk about, obviously we are not getting into a discussion of philosophical and practical discussion of that. People are rather focusing on their needs, they are governed by wants, and even beyond that by their desires and aspirations. We are not talking of that. But what is important to note is, I told you that let's say if we have certain wants, let's say you go after a hectic day from office to home. Pay attention to this, after a hectic day at office, you reach home, and let's say by the time you reach home, you're extremely thirsty, you're extremely tired and thirsty, and your mom or your spouse comes and tells you that guess what have I prepared for dinner for you today. But since you're dead thirsty today, you're not interested. You tell me that, well, my most important need at the top is thirst, and I want some water. First give me something to drink, we'll talk later. Now this need was at the top. Once you had water had a want satisfying capacity, which we said the value in product, and this was your intensity of desire. So water was the most satisfied thing at that point in time. Once you had water, your intensity of desire came down. Water went down the hierarchy, and the next most important need emerged at the top. Now this could have been hunger. This could have been hunger. You tell them, yes, we couldn't have anything to eat. It was a tough, long day today. So now you tell me, what have you prepared for me? And I would be more keen on having it. If the menu is of your taste, you'll be more happy. If it is something that you don't like much, you would still insist, okay, as long as it is there, it is hot, I would like to have it. Once you eat something, hunger takes a back seat, and probably you realize that you're tired and you need some rest. So you try to go and hit the bed, you sleep for a while and so on. And if it was a daytime, let's say for example you were going out of college, then after getting up you would have realized that no, a man is a social animal. I need company of friends. I need to go out, spend some time, work on social media, do some get together with friends and so on. And you would have gone out to do that. So what's happening, if you see, is the hierarchy is changing. The products, the needs which are satisfied are going down, and the new needs are emerging at the top. This is called that needs and wants are ever changing. They are ever changing, which I discussed in the previous class. But the second problem with this is that this glass of water will not satisfy you forever. After meeting friends, going out, playing with them, once you come home back, there is again going to be a time when you will feel thirsty. There's again going to be a time when you will feel hungry. There's again going to be a time when you'll feel tired and need some rest. That means these needs, wants, and demands are also everlasting. They cannot be satisfied forever. And this ever changing and everlasting dynamics of demand makes demand very dynamic. And because the demand becomes dynamic, economic decisions related to deal with them become more complex and challenging. So for this, we need to understand certain concepts, and the first we'll understand is a law which we call as law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, in economics, you would also study laws, and as I said, laws are more, I would say, universally acceptable phenomena that have been tested over a period of time, and these are like rule of thumb. These are scientific, directions that you have made. So these are not just concepts, approaches, or models. These are laws, and laws of economics and nature hold true in every scenario. So law of diminishing marginal utility tells you a very interesting fact that works, that whenever under certain conditions and assumptions. What are those assumptions? Because if you don't hold the assumptions, it will be very difficult to analyze the reality that lies within the behavior of a utility. So assumption is that if you are dealing with homogeneous products, means the product's quality does not change. It's the same product that you consume one after another. And second, there is no gap involved, substantial gap involved in the consumption of that commodity. That means it's not about having a glass now and having a glass in the evening or afternoon. It's about subsequent units of consumption of the same product. Or if it's about a particular, you are having a particular dish in the morning, having the same dish in the afternoon or evening, and then next morning. So regular. So it is regular. There is no gap involved. It is on a regular basis, and the product's nature is homogeneous. And third, we may assume, but it is obviously that the commodity is a normal commodity. But however, I'll talk about that in detail. Under these situations, with every subsequent consumption of different units of a commodity, with subsequent consumption of various units of a commodity, okay, the marginal utility of that commodity X, right, keeps declining from the very first instance. यानी जैसे जैसे हम किसी भी कमोडिटी की एडिशनल यूनिट्स को लेते हैं, सेम यूनिट्स विदाउट मच गैप एट अ रेगुलर इंटरवल, we find that the marginal utility or the additional satisfaction that we derive from every subsequent unit is bound to fall. It's bound to decline. That means if we understand from the perspective of the diagram which we had studied, if I take the total utility, the marginal utility, and the average utility for commodity X here, and the units of X on the x-axis, right? The marginal utility in the first instance, if it was here, it will keep declining from there, and there might come a time where this marginal utility becomes zero and can even become negative. That means the marginal utility, if it is declining, the average also keeps declining, and the total utility is increasing at a decreasing rate. With marginal falling, the total increases at a decreasing rate. We've already discussed that. And the point where the marginal utility is zero shows that a time comes when the total maximum satisfaction reaches its maximum, and then it starts declining if we go beyond consuming the same units, the same commodity any further. This phenomena of constant fall in marginal utility or the additional utility that you derive from every subsequent unit of consumption of the same commodity is called law of diminishing marginal utility. That as we go on consuming units of the same commodity at regular intervals, the marginal utility or the additional satisfaction keeps declining at every subsequent consumption of that commodity. Is this much clear to you all? And the assumption is all other factors held constant. Primarily, the nature of the commodity is homogeneous, there's no change in the product, and it is regular interval. Now, if I change the product, let's say you went to the canteen, you had a glass of Coke, and you were partly satisfied. You wanted to have another, but not as satisfying as the first one. But you came across that somebody, you did not like it much. There was less of fizz. The temperature had not been that cold, and you saw that somebody else came to the canteen, and now the canteen vendor opened out a fresh bottle of Coke. He opened out a fresh bottle of Coke, which had a lot of fizz when it opened, and it was more chilled than probably the first one. And you felt like having another glass. And when you had the other glass, this glass gave you more satisfaction than the previous, even if the intensity of desire to some extent had fallen. But this time, the value of the product, the quality of the product had changed. So that's where innovation also works. Why do companies innovate products? Because they want the utility to increase. People might get bored and fed up of using the same product. That could also be one of the ways. Or why do bring additional features into the products could be one of the ways. Because companies don't want you to just wait to sell the product again after a while when the utility goes up. They need to enhance the utility for you to buy the product again. So a lot of places you'll find that the law of diminishing marginal utility works, and this is the fundamental principle on which the law of demand, which we'll study subsequently, is based. The law of demand greatly depends on one of these important laws called law of diminishing marginal utility. So how do we see this? If there is a question, you know that first you have to define law of diminishing marginal utility, which I just talked about. The law of diminishing marginal utility is a law that explains that when you consume additional units of the same commodity at regular intervals, the marginal utility keeps falling from the very first instance and can go to zero and negative levels with every subsequent consumption. And this law can then be shown, because you must write good answers to support your, to get better marks. So once you've explained this, you can illustrate it with the help of a table and a graph or a diagram. And for a table, you can show a commodity X, units of commodity X, right? And then you can show the total utility from X, the marginal utility from X, the average utility from X. And let's say you take a hypothetical case and you say when the total utility in the first instance was 10, in the second case it came down to maybe 7, in the third it came down to 3, or maybe 0 or -2. And that's what you show here. As I actually mentioned figures of marginal here. So this is 10, 17, 20, 20, and 18. And what happens to the average? You can show the figures 10, right? 9.5. Sorry, my fault. So 2 8 is 8.5, and then 6. I think 3 6 18. Yeah, 3 6 is 6.66, 5, and then 3.6. So now you show that graphically, and when you show that graphically, unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the same units of the value here, you would be able to show that the total utility increased, till the fourth unit and then decline. And at the fourth unit, the marginal satisfaction was 0, and the average, if you draw, would go something like this. You label it as X, Y. You showed PU of X, MU of X, and AU of X here, and the units of X, units of X here, and that's how you draw the diagram. So from an examination perspective, this is what I expect you to be able to do that. But now we'll come to the more practical perspective, understanding a very important law that comes out of it, and we call it law of demand. So first thing, before coming to law of demand, we would have to understand a term called demand, and we'll talk about demand and then go on to law of demand, and we'll end up probably here, and then tomorrow we'll go to understanding supply, law of supply, and finally elasticity as a concept. So today we'll end up at law of demand, but let's focus it. So now in economics, the term demand is very interesting. Demand may be treated by a lot of people as synonymous to needs, wants, or desires. However, these are different things, right? Desires are more based on aspirations beyond what you need. They may not be necessary, but then because of innovation, because of technology, because of globalization, your desires and aspirations can go up. But the needs still remain the same. You could have food, clothing, shelter as the basic needs. Certain things might move from need to, from desires to needs depending on the nature of technology. Like a cell phone at some point in time would have been a luxury for people, and then probably a comfort. But today it may seem to be a necessity for many, for them to work at workplaces, because if you don't have a phone, you can't work on WhatsApp, you can't work on the internet, and organizations would like you to be on WhatsApp groups in order to expedite the work. So you may not say that you cannot survive without it, but you can't survive in the business or in your jobs without a cell phone. And so it has moved up the hierarchy from a luxury to a comfort or a necessity. But demand exactly is what? So demand, when the firms try to anticipate demand, they are actually looking at the needs, wants, or desires of the people. If there are needs, obviously they make products. If there are desires, you would try to push people to focus on that desire and buy those products through branding and promotion and so on. But the most important factor is that how many people will be able to buy it. If you survey everybody and ask them, would you like to fly in an aeroplane? Everybody would say yes. Even a beggar might say yes to you. As long as you're talking about his aspirations, he would love to. But whether is he a customer as of now or not, whether can he afford, whether when you are anticipating how many planes to buy and what number of people will fly the aeroplane and plan your, or people would buy a product and plan your production, that's where this result will go wrong, because you have also included the entire population. So demand here talks about those customers who have not only the willingness but also the ability to buy the product. So we call it that demand is a desire. It is a desire or a need backed by ability, willingness and ability to buy the product. And ability is called purchasing power. Do you have the purchasing power to buy the product? So even if one problem is that people don't want to buy your product, you have a product but people don't want to buy, that's the first problem. So you need to create willingness. The second problem is, even if people are willing to buy, can they afford your product? Do they have the purchasing power? So only those people who would be willing to buy and have the purchasing power or capacity to buy the product will qualify to become your valid demand. So demand is nothing but a valid or a valid demand is nothing but an effective desire. We call it effective desire, and desire only becomes effective when it has willingness, and obviously desire should have willingness and ability, purchasing power for people to buy the product. You're getting my point? अगर लोग willing भी हैं, अब willingness आप कैसे create करोगे आपको पता है. It's very easy to create willingness, relatively easy. You have advertising, you have branding, you have promotions, different promotion strategies. You can create features into the products. You can increase the value of the product. So you can do a lot of things in order to increase the willingness. Bring some features that satisfy a particular need. Identify a need which is not being fulfilled, and you're trying to create products, right? A lot of products are need based, and a lot of products are not need based. They create the need, or they make you identify a need. They push. So it's those products, for example, need based products you all know, but which are based on the requirement. But sometimes the products are created so innovative that they're pushed, like technology products. You realize that you have a need. They make you realize a hidden need which was not apparent. But some products have an apparent need and they meet for it. So if I talk about deodorants, for example, deodorants were products which were made to meet the problem of bad odor. People had bad odor, bad smelling, because of perspiration stuff, and deodorant was a way of doing that. And this was based on a need for this purpose. This was not to encourage you not to take a shower or to wear this as a fragrance. It was not a substitute to perfumes, right? Perfumes had a different requirement. But then as companies realized, they moved on from the rubbing ball technology, which had issues. People did not like it. People were embarrassed buying deodorants. Giving somebody a deodorant was even more embarrassing, because people thought that you're trying to tell them in a way about their foul smell. People moved on, and alongside there came a technology which we all know was aerosols. So when aerosols came, it was easier for you to share a deodorant. So you could buy one, and different people in the house could use it, and it was not more personalized because of the rubber ball technique and less chances of infection. It became popular. Deodorants came from Rexona, this rubber ball technique was not very well accepted after a while, and then came aerosols, so you could spray them. But then companies gradually used marketing and their gimmicks to tell people that no, this is not a deodorant, this is a body spray. They started calling it a body spray, changed the whole perception around it. And then, with all advertising and promotions, you wear a good body spray and the angels fall from heaven for you, or the opposite gender runs after you and stuff, and you're very well accepted in the society. They try to create a complete euphoria for this product. They brought it in vogue, they brought it in fashion, and people started gifting deodorants as body sprays to other people, and soon the deodorant or the body spray was able to even kill, to a great extent, the perfume business. People were wearing body sprays not only around the body, they were wearing it on their clothes and stuff. So that's how the whole strategy based on economics and demand creation and marketing and promotions goes. But the idea is demand, you can create willingness through these techniques. But how would you create? It's easy to still create willingness, and that's what you'll study in marketing, you'll study in promotion, you'll study in branding, advertising, and so on. So willingness can be created, but how would you create? And by including new features and different aspects to the product, by innovating. So willingness is fine, you'll create that. But how would you create ability? How can you create purchasing power? That is not in your control. How can you raise the income of the people to buy the product? You can't do that. That depends on the economic scenario. You can't increase the income of the people. So do we mean that can firms really create demand? Because demand was a combination of willingness and ability. So willingness still can be created. People who don't want to buy the product today. So those who want to buy and have the ability, there is a demand. But people who want to buy and don't have the ability, you can still convert them into a demand, right? By making them willing through innovation and all that I talked about, product development and features and branding and promotion. But can you convert those who have the willingness but who do not have the ability? Can those qualify to become demand? Can we do that? That's my question to you. And that's how companies would generally think when they'll apply economics to real business. Can you, besides the existing demand in your demography, can you create further demand for among those people who cannot afford your product? Is it possible?
Yes, sir.
How would we do that?
By reducing the price.
Good, very good. Now the question comes, a lot of people say that by giving discounts or by giving the price, this is one way that they make it more appealing to the customers. It's another way of increasing willingness, I would say, rather than affordability. Reason being, there are some places where you get a genuine discount. So that means the product was made for, let's say, 10,000, but it was it was being sold, it was, the MRP was at 10,000 and the product was made for 5,000. I'm giving a hypothetical case, but the firm was pricing it at 10,000. So when the firm finds that by reducing the price at 7,000 rupees, I wrote 50,000, my fault, so 5,000, at 7,000 there would be a good number of people who will now be able to afford it. That's one aspect, what you rightly said. So to some extent, yes, reducing the prices works, but at most places this is not the case. At most places the margins are already high, and firms these days use a gimmick that if the product is produced for 5,000, they would like to show you that the MRP is 10 and they'll show you a discount of 3 already and sell it at 7. So in that case, price reduction really doesn't work, and even if it works, the price reduction will lead to dilution of margin. प्राइस रिड्यूस करने से क्या दिक्कत आती है? मार्जिन कम हो जाता है, प्रॉफिट मार्जिन कम हो जाएगा, प्रॉफिट मार्जिन कम हो जाएगा, बट दूसरी तरफ डिमांड बढ़ जाएगी। तो एक तरफ डिमांड बढ़ा दी, एक तरफ मार्जिन कम हो गया, लेकिन घूम फिर के आपकी सेल्स बढ़ गई, बट आपका प्रॉफिट पे बहुत ज़्यादा इफेक्ट हो सकता है ना पड़े. यू मे नॉट बी एबल टू स्टिल अर्न मोर प्रॉफिट्स. So it doesn't really work much. It does, it is one of the ways, so I'm not denying that's one way of increasing demand, but it's not that effective. Can you try a way that सांप भी मर जाए और लाठी भी ना छूटे? Is there a way? So firms innovate. Innovation is not only on the product. Innovation is based out of how people have utilized economics, understanding behavioral patterns of people, understanding financial innovations. All those are based on behavioral economics or behavioral finance. So there's a very interesting tool. If you remember, one of the greatest innovations that I call of the of whether you call it the economics or scholars or finance experts who understood economics, or you may call it the market or the humans, was the idea of EMI. So EMI, in business world, was one of the greatest innovations that really worked. And what did EMI tell you? EMI was the best way of handling this problem. It said, no, we are neither reducing the price, we will not reduce it, we are not going to squeeze our margins for you. And why do we incur a loss by giving discounts or reduce our margins? Or if it does not increase our profit, because margin squeeze, demand increases, it may end up being the same. The best way is that what we do is we allow you to buy a product worth 10,000, right, by paying us 1,000 every month, 1K every month. And instead of 10 months, you pay us 11 months. You pay us 11 months. So you end up paying 11,000, but people who had a salary or an income of 5,000 per month, who were unable to buy this product, can now take out 1,000 every month for the next not only 10 months and 11 months, and can easily pay 11,000 happily, because 10,000 is what they pay out of convenience, and 1,000 goes to the company or to the bank, whosoever, because of, you have already studied the time value of money. There's a discounting, there's inflation happening. The 10 rupees received tomorrow are not the same as 10 rupees today. So the firm is also trying to cover up that discounting principle, cover up that loss by getting some extra money. The advantage of this is you are assured of customers. Number one, your demand goes up. So people who did not qualify to be your customers now qualify to become your customers. And consumerism, if I talk about the word consumerism and the concept further to GDP and everything, has only gained prominence with one of these innovations of behavioral, I would say, of economic, financial economics revolution or reform called EMI. Now, if you look at EMI, this was an innovation, and you can also do that. This is an innovation, especially for students of finance and behavioral science, that this innovation, if you see, has come out of what? The three principles that I talked about, if you remember, very beautifully done. What were those? It was, if you remember, opportunity cost, it was marginal principle, and it was time perspective principle. They were beautifully understood. Time perspective said that, okay, you pay for 10 months, you can't pay now, but then I am assured of a customer, and then because there's a time value of money and the value of money will depreciate, I would charge you an extra money. But at the same time, look at the customer. He's happy to pay this marginally in small units because it's much more convenient than him to pay the total amount. And the opportunity cost is amazing. Opportunity, you covered up that cost of opportunity, that if a person waited for a time when he had 10,000 rupees in his pocket, the product's price might have gone up, and so on and so forth in future. Or maybe his need would have changed after a while. If his income went substantially up, he wouldn't have purchased your product. There's so much of uncertainty. या तो उसकी ज़रूरत उस एज तक खत्म हो गई. Let's say you were young, you wanted to buy a good bike. By the time you earned the money and got away from your responsibilities, it was an age to drive a car. And then by the time you thought of buying a bullet, your body, was not in a condition to drive a heavy vehicle. So, and your taste and preferences might change. So you have got that customer booked into buying that particular product, and that's how EMI works. So demand can be created using a lot of innovations, playing with price, number one. And number two, you can also try with a lot of things like EMIs and various other ways by which you can make the products affordable, even without reducing the price or giving discounts or squeezing your profit margins. I hope you've understood this much by now. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes,
that
sir.
completes 40 minutes for today. We now have to do law of demand based on this law. So would you like to do it tomorrow or today? We can do law of demand and supply tomorrow as well if you want, and then go ahead. So just let me know if you're okay. I can continue. Otherwise, I'll call it a day and then cover it